And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Dr. Scott, who during his near-death experience learned how to heal himself. Dr. Scott, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity that you and your wife have given me today.
Well, Scott, we are thrilled to have you here. And if you don't mind, let's start on the day that this experience happened and go from there.
The day in time was my graduation from high school. Jewish kid graduating from Catholic school in 1976. 3 days after high school graduation, my dad had bought me a used car. My dad was in the car business, so he got me a nice used car. And I got it, was going to go pick up my friend Lou to go to Lake Opatcon in the New York-New Jersey border. So I went and picked him up at 5 o'clock in the morning, said goodbye to my mom and dad, got on the highway, picked him up, got back on the highway, and I got onto the entrance of Route 80 that said downtown Patterson, next exit, and suddenly something strange began to occur. I looked down in my hands and I went, I can see through them. If this is death, there's nothing to be afraid of. And that's the last thing I remembered before being pulled out of my body. I was told later by the police that I had driven 23 miles, but I had no memory of it. What had occurred is I came out of my body, went down a tunnel, ended up at the gates of heaven where I saw my grandfather. Now, I knew my grandfather. I'd never met him, but I had known that he had died the year before I was born. And he said, you don't belong here. You have to fulfill your purpose and missions in life. But before you return, I have someone to introduce you to. And he brought me into a small room where he introduced me to three beings. One with his back towards me with wavy hair, and two that were facing me from the other side. At the moment, I didn't know who they were until the being turned around and they said, are you the being everybody calls Jesus? And he smiled, and I knew immediately that was. And he said, I'm called by many names, but because of your heritage, I will call you the Little Prince of Peace, and you can call me Big Brother. I have to send you back now because you have to fulfill your purpose and missions in life, and you've got to go back. And I said, well, what is my mission and purpose in life? And first he said, you'll learn it. And later on, he would tell me that I would learn a simple technique to heal myself and share that with other people. So that's what I did. I went back, not knowing what I was doing or where I was going. And as he said, I got to return, I went, oh, shoot. And I took my right hand and hit my left hand with it. So my fist in my right hand on my left hand. And the next thing I knew, I was back in my body. Now, what was happening on the other side is my parents were called at 7 a.m. saying, your son's been in a very bad accident. Please come identify your son's body in the morgue at St. Joseph's Hospital. So my mom and dad raced over to the hospital. And instead of going into the front, my mom said, let's go to the back. That's where the morgue was. They walked down the hallway, saw a man pushing a body on a gurney. They didn't know who it was. And as they got closer, he vanished. And they came over to see who this body was. They pulled back my sheet, and yeah, lo and behold, it was me. And I sat up and said, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, I met Grandpa, I met God. And they said, son, you had an accident. And they said, come with us. And as I went to get off the table, I went, oh man, my head hurts. And so my mom grabbed one arm, my dad grabbed the other arm, and they helped me jump off the table, put me down the hallway. They walked me down the hallway through these double doors. I walked out the double doors, and I laid down in the back of my dad's car. The next day, they would take me to Montefiore Hospital in New York, where the doctor said, I'm not exactly sure what happened to you. Your DMT levels are off the charts. Your EEG and EKG are just erratic. And my doctor, Dr. Barry Ludwig at the time, who would eventually move to Santa Monica, and that was what enticed me to go to California. he would say, I'm not sure what exactly occurred to you, but here's this book. I think you should read it. And simultaneously, he had told my mom, and she said the same thing. And that was Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. And I started to read it and realized I was in a very unique crowd of individuals. I had just had my first near-death experience. All right, fast forward. I decide, since they tell me I'm supposed to learn a simple technique to heal myself and share that with others, that I would start investigating medical things about where to go to school. I went to college and then graduate school. Where was I going to go? And my heart's desire was to go to chiropractic college. But I'd also went on beyond that. I would practice in Israel and I would become a medical examiner, come back to the United States of America, where I would practice up in the San Jose area and become a medical examiner for the state of California. Now, here it is, 18 years after that first near-death experience, and I have another one. I'm a flight examiner, a medical examiner for the state workers' compensation, and I did a lot of court work. I was a medical expert witness, and on one of these occasions in December, I was doing some training up in Lake Arrowhead, and that's the Santa Monica Mountains and the San Bernardino Range, because that's where I would practice. And my flight instructor, Lisa, took me up. We flew out of Long Beach, and I was practicing touch and goes, because if you made a mistake on that runway, Lake Arrowhead, you would go right into the lake, and it was cold. It was 8,000 feet high. So on one of these approaches and takeoffs, I went up higher to about 12,000 feet, and I suddenly got really dizzy and very lightheaded. And I slumped over, almost blacked out, slumped over the yoke of my little Beach Sierra C-24R, which was a retractable landing gear. And it was what called a baby bonanza. I slumped over and she pushed the plane down. So we went down below about 8,000 feet and I regained consciousness. I didn't know what had occurred. And she flew me back to our home base in Long Beach, where I got out of the plane, got in my car, and still feeling really dizzy. And I had at that time, one, because my brother was a police officer, and two, because I worked with the police department in San Diego and Los Angeles. I had a little sticker that said this thin blue line on my car. And so a police officer stopped me and said, "What's happening? What do you?" And I said, "I can't figure it out. I'm having a hard time and I need to either get home or to the doctor's office." And so he followed me into a point where he said, "I got to go back now." He was a CHIP, California Highway Patrol officer. He went back onto the highway and I drove the extra mile back to my house in Long Beach. I went then to my medical examiner's office because all pilots have to be re-examined annually. I was due for my annual flight exam, and they found that I was bleeding internally and was severely anemic. He forwarded me to the Keck Institute at USC Medical Center. People know General Hospital, the soap opera. Well, that's where it was. And the Keck Institute was located just behind that building and that huge gate. And I went in there because I knew somebody who had practiced there. So they referred me there and they suggested I go home and get all my ducks in a row and everything in order. They had found something on a shadow on my kidney and they didn't expect me to be around very long. They said, "We want you to take this therapy," which I said, "Hey, I'm not taking your therapy. If I'm not going to live long, that will definitely not help. It will probably push me over and exit this reality quicker." But since God didn't tell me I was going home anytime soon, I said, "I don't accept your diagnosis. And I'm going down to Mexico, where I worked with the Gerson Institute and Hulda Clark. And I became both a doctor and a patient there at the same time." I came back 3 months later, went back to the doctors there at the Keck Institute, and they said, "We can't find anything wrong. We must have made a mistake, misdiagnosis." And I said, "You do realize you're talking to a former medical examiner?" And the doctor went, "Uh-huh." And he shut up. He retired. The other doctor died. My file disappeared. And the third doctor gave me a very hard time. I got out of the door and I prayed for him and his staff who didn't believe in healing except they did it. I sat down and I would do this technique called Einstein. I'd pray for the doctor and the staff and for me, and I became calm again. And I said, I'm never going to return to them ever again. And those were my two near-death experiences in a nutshell. Now, there is something I wanted to add. My mom and dad were the only ones who knew about my near-death experience, except for Dr. Barry Ludwig. And because I had promised I wasn't going to drive, I lived on campus in college, and it would be later on that I would make sure that everything was cool before I went back to driving and flying. Now, fast forward, on the other side, they told me I would be taking care of my mom and dad until their own earthly deaths. As a matter of fact, I would be returned to this earth for that specific purpose. I could not help them in a previous lifetime, and I had volunteered with love to come back and help my parents. At my father's passing, he would give me a gift 3 days after his passing, and I would receive a sense of humor. And from that point on, my little patients used to call me Dr. Silly because I became suddenly very silly. And then at the time of my mom's death, when she was 97, just a couple of years ago, she would give me a gift. She would appear 3 days after her passing, and she would say, "No more grieving, no more guilt. Gotta go now." And she took away all grief, all guilt. And she woke me up, and I thought maybe I was hallucinating. This was a dream. But our little dog, Lucky, who wouldn't move after my mom died, came running into my bedroom looking for Grandma. Where's Grandma? And he kept going all around my bed. Where's Grandma? So it meant he heard my mom's voice too. At the time of my mom's memorial, the rabbi that was performing that service said, it's okay to grieve. In Jewish law, you can grieve for 11 months. I said, "No, Rabbi, you don't understand. My mom gave me a wonderful gift. She took away the grief and the guilt. I don't have it anymore. So if you want it, I'll gladly give it to you, but I don't need it. But that's my mom's gift." And that's what happened. And from that point on, I would start utilizing the gifts that the other side gave me. I would learn that simple technique, and that technique is called Einstellen, Einstellen. It's a German word, which means tuning into the source, whatever you call the source, and asking for help in whatever way you want and need. And meanwhile, I identified those two other people in the room. One was Michael the Archangel, and I knew the other one later would be the being that met my mom and my dad that was pushing my body into the morgue's refrigeration unit. But I'll share that later with people in private. Any other questions for me, Jeff?
Can we go back to the very beginning? Because I'm a little confused about how your accident happened. You were driving and then you left your body and then you got in an accident, or you got in an accident first and left your body?
I really don't know, because the only witness to the accident refused to talk to me. My friend Lou, who we were going to his home on Lake Opakon in New York, New Jersey border, he would never tell me what happened. But I was driving, and yet when the police officer opened up the door, I was on the right side of the car, and I never knew how I got there. According to the police report, the car was spun, and I came flying out of my three-point belt and hit my head into the windshield. And to the old cars, you remember you had the grab piece there, and I somehow hit that. I still have a dent in my head there. But it was never made clear what happened. The only witness, like I said, refused to talk. And the police officer retired 9 months after that. And I never knew exactly what occurred. Was I hit? Did I spin? Did I lose control? Did I die before I actually had the accident? I don't know. All I know is I crossed out of my body, went down, and the only thing I remember was the guardian angel that was with me stopped me before we went down the quote tube to get to heaven, and told me to look down on the earth and ask me what I saw. And I said, "Okay, what am I looking at?" And he said, those white lines coming up from Earth are prayers. The big ones are group prayers with people praying for the same thing in unison. And the hidden ones are individual prayers. And I said, okay. And then we proceeded going down the tunnel to heaven. So hopefully that answers the question, because I really never knew what happened. Nobody would ever tell me. But my dad and my mom would fix the car and eventually give that automobile to my brother, because I never drove it after that.
After your first or second NDE, did you notice that you had any new abilities that could be considered psychic?
Yes. Number one, I could smell the angels. People said, what does an angel smell like? Uh, the fragrance of an angel is, well, heavenly. And it actually is a delicious fragrance. It makes me hungry every time I think about it. The closest way I can explain it, for those that know what dragon's blood incense is, it smells sort of like dragon's blood incense mixed with strawberries. And if everybody, or excuse me, if anybody's ever smelled a lemon or grapefruit blossom, have you ever smelled one of those?
Yeah, it's
What a
amazing.
beautiful fragrance. And each angel has its own unique and specific fragrance. Now, on the other side of the coin, bad guy angels stink like an ashtray, and you can pick it up really quickly. And almost all of us, people who are called near-death experiencers, we have some kind of gift, and that's one of them. Now, after my first near-death experience, when I was still in about high school, I do also remember to be able to predict um, who was going to win a football game. And as a result, I made a lot of friends want to know who was going to win. And so they'd bet on games. Funny thing was, I couldn't bet on the games. And I thought for sure these newfound friends would give me something after they won their money, but they never did. And so I stopped using that gift. Eventually, when I became a medical examiner, I could use the gift to be able to see people, especially if they were guilty or innocent, and be able to determine whether or not I wanted to sit on this case or not, or what I should do, especially since near the end of my career, I was working with child molestation cases, murder cases, and they were not any fun. And if I saw that, I would try to tell the prosecutor what was happening, and I didn't really want to sit the case unless somebody was hiring me for the prosecution. If, on the other hand, the defense hired me to see if the case was valid or not, if the person was innocent or guilty, if they wanted to hire me and the person was what I could feel was guilty, or they had no remorse about what was happening, I didn't want to take the case. So I would only take the case for the defense if I felt, if I truly believed from what I could see around the person, if they were truly innocent, then I wanted to stay there and help them fight for their freedom. But if they were guilty, I made sure that the prosecution did their best. Although the prosecution sometimes just didn't want to listen to me. Nothing I could do about that. So I would have other gifts and abilities. I have the ability to see things around people. It's called faint matter. And for instance, that you have something over here on your right side of your head, and that tells me there's an emotional trauma or an issue. And one of the stories I tell people is I got hired for a consultation to come in of a buddy of mine, really good diagnostician. He used BEST, if you're familiar with bioenergetic synchronization technique. I mean, this guy was really good at diagnosing, but for some reason, a couple of his clients just were having a hard time and he could not figure it out. And that was like unheard of for him. So he asked me to come in and do my thing. And I did my prayers, which allowed me my divine insight. And I saw around this one woman a really dark cloud on the right side of her head around her eye. And I said, you have been harmed by three people. They're all men. One more than the other two forced you to do something against your will. What was it? I knew it wasn't rape. I knew it was something else. And she said to me, oh, yeah, 7 years ago, I was told by my doctors, especially this one doctor, that if I didn't take chemotherapy therapy, they were going to cut me off from my insurance, which, if you know, that's against the law. You're not supposed to do that. So she had been holding that anger and rage and resentment towards those doctors in the medical community since then. And I said, all right. The doctor was flabbergasted and said, oh my gosh, how could you see that? I said, I can't tell you how I see it. I just do. And I asked her, would you like me to clear this negative energy away from your auric field? Or would you like the other doctor to work on you? And she said, I'll have the other doctor work on me. And I said, okay. And my job was done. I would do that with one other of his clients and do the same thing. But hers was rather dramatic, where I could see it so clearly. And I could touch their auric field, not even needing to get anywhere near them. I could touch their field. And now I have that ability to use it even long distance when I work with people online on Zoom. I don't need to actually be in the room or even in the same country. I can actually feel the other person's faint matter and tell them what's going on in their reality. People call it a psychic. I call it a medical intuitive. And it's just my ability to use my auric field to reach out and touch another soul. And that all comes from the divine. I don't claim anything. I don't make any healing things of, oh, this can, no, I don't state that at all. I am merely a conduit. Any gifts that come through me. They come from God through me to the other soul. I have nothing to do with the healing process whatsoever, and I don't take responsibility for it. It's all up to the big guy. Going back to the other questions, did I have other gifts? I'm sure I did, but I didn't know what to do with them when I was younger. I had no clue. And I think my medical background and teaching and my medical legal background helped me put it into greater focus. And as the years have gone by, especially since my mom's passing, I believe that those gifts have become stronger. And when they turn on, they turn on. If they don't turn on, I can't make them turn on. So hopefully that answered your question.
I want to go back to where you were talking about how you could smell the bad angels. Can an angel really be bad, or would you consider that a demon?
Now, there's a differentiation in realities. There are bad angels. They work for the demonic or satanic forces. There are demons and satanic beings, and our world has been built up and destroyed. This most recent incarnation is satanic. The one before is demonic, and anything left over was taken over by the satanic beings. Before that, there was a being called Beelzebub, and before that, there was another one. And each one has gotten up to a certain spiritual level and been destroyed by the creator. And the next level is taken over by that. But there are actually Elohim or bad guy angels, and they stink. They look like a shadow crawling up a wall where there is no light. That's another thing. You can always identify them because they look like this shadow where there shouldn't be a shadow. And they smell like an ashtray. Now, demonic beings and satanic beings, they will come from behind. They are cowardice. They hit you from the blind side. They'll stab you. They'll cause you harm. They'll trip you up. There's a whole bunch of them. And by divine law, you get to identify them and call them out. So I can actually identify them, call them out. They have to tell me who they are, and then we can get rid of them. So there is a differentiation. And we were talking earlier before we actually went on air. And originally this planet, which God created as the university of God, is the highest level for all the children of God to come down here. God put all the evil in the universe on this planet. And our job is to master this reality, endure, persevere, and overcome it. Evil's job? To destroy us. So this has gone on infinitum. There's also 52 races of beings from other worlds that come to actually witness the dichotomy between good and evil on this planet because it no longer exists in their reality. And those souls are different than our souls. The alien beings that I was told about and were shared with, their soul is different than us. This vessel that's within our humanoid form, which has been genetically modified by many of these beings from other worlds, does so for their own purposes. There's 3 races of these beings that go out of their way to cause us harm. They work for the dark side. And there's two races of beings that come to try to help us, to prevent us from being destroyed. And so all these things blend together and say, how does a near-death experience guy know all that? How does that intermix? Because if you don't know where you are in the universe and what this planet's all about, then you will totally be confused. Is the moon an artificial satellite meant to control or manipulate through astrological means? Or is it made here as a result to improve tide waves and spiritual energy? Who knows? Who cares? Do you really want to know? Everybody has their own way that they have to understand this reality. For me, it doesn't matter. And one of the things the other side has told me, you are here to learn and become closer to the creator by learning through the dichotomy of good versus evil. You need to go any further? Nah.
Have you had any contact with these extraterrestrial beings?
I've had two experiences, what I'll call close calls with them, where I've seen their ships. One looked like an orb. I was in the Delaware Water Gap. I was up at a summer camp, and I saw this thing floating over the top of us. It glowed and it had no sound. There was absolutely none. I called the Air Force Command that night. And they said, there's nothing up there that belongs to us. We have no idea what you're talking about. You saw the reflection over the Delaware River, because where I was the Delaware Water Gap. The water area is very shallow and very narrow. And then another experience when I was coming home near Camp Pendleton in California, and another one of those things, but it wasn't an orb, it was cylindrical, and it was spinning behind me, and I tried to outrun it, but that was not a good thing to do, because I was on a narrow road climbing up from Lake Elsinore up into Orange County, and I turned around somewhere up there by La Cresta, and that thing disappeared. Were they alien spaceships? I don't know. Were they something made here on this planet by military? I don't know. But I do know that it wasn't anything I had ever seen before, and nothing that the military ever acknowledged. Did I ever meet any alien beings? There's been a couple occasions when I met people with pink eyes, and they were tall and thin with blonde, stringy hair. And if I didn't know any better, they didn't look like most humans I had ever seen. They were looking like albinos. And I was like asking, where do they come from? And then they suddenly would walk away from me and disappear. Did I ever really meet them? It's not like anybody ever said to me, hey, I'm not from your world. I don't know, but I do know with 52 races of beings that regularly come to this world to investigate the dichotomy between good and evil. If if I did meet them, they weren't going to tell me.
You mentioned that there are 2 races that are here to help us and 3 that are against us. Do you know the names of these races? Like the Greys and stuff?
Yeah, well, two of the grays aren't really alien beings. They're artificially manufactured from other worlds. The group, I think they call themselves Arcturians. I'm not sure.
Like
But
robots? I mean, you're saying the Greys
yeah,
are
they're
like
like
robots?
artificial life forms. But and they're sent because humanoid forms have a hard time traveling through space, especially long distance, and it can distort us and actually affect our DNA. But two of the beings that I was told are actually not alien at all. They're actually humanoid forms, us in future, somewhere between 2,400 years from in the future, or between 4,800 years into the future. I might be wrong on the amount of years into the future. And they're actually coming back from their time to be able to create a reality to destroy our planet. So their reality continues and ours ceases. The third one is a lizard-like. He's reptilian, and they love our souls. It was said that that race of beings lives on the backside of the moon. I can't prove any of this stuff. And that's just things that I was told. And their objective is to take people's souls and feed off of them, feed off the fear, manipulate them It is said that they have receptor sites on the moon to absorb souls who've committed suicide. And that's one of the things that I was told, don't commit suicide unless it was built into your understanding of reality. In other words, you're committing suicide to help another soul. But the majority of people who commit suicide, their soul can be lost or go up to the moon, and they'll be manipulated, used, or abused by those forces of reptilian creatures. The other thing is, can I prove this? No, this is only what I was told from the other side when I asked the angels questions. They said, don't commit suicide and don't hate anything or anyone. If you hate anything or anyone, your chances are that you'll be reincarnated into the thing you hate most. So what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, or Israel and Palestine, there's going to be a lot of people coming back on the opposite end. A lot of Palestinians coming back as Israelis, a lot of Israelis coming back as Palestinians, and vice versa. There's a lot going on that people don't know. They actually said to me, when you see the war between good and evil, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg in your reality. 90% of what's going on, you can't even see. So there is a war between the good side and the bad side, good angels and bad angels. And the dark forces use other beings from other times, spaces, and realities, and they recruit them and manipulate them to cause us humans harm. Again, remember, the real reason this planet exists is for us humans to master this reality. No matter if we've been manipulated by outside forces and our genes pool has been changed by aliens, doesn't matter. You're coming here to master this reality, endure, persevere, and overcome it. While the dark forces have one job, they're here to destroy you. And if they can blow up the planet, they can escape. And that's the real thing about a prison planet. They're stuck here. They can't go anywhere. So if they destroy this world, then they can leave. And the only way they can truly die, God has to destroy them. And death, according to the angels on the other side, is when God destroys evil and breaks it up in such a small amount, it can never know itself because it can never touch itself. So imagine your body being separated so small that no one cell or even atom can ever touch itself, and it's disseminated throughout the universe. That is true death, to never know yourself ever again. We, on the other hand, we come back as often as possible till we're done. But is karma real? No, not really. You must choose to come back with a contractual agreement through love. And that's the difference. A lot of the things humans have been told have been lies. You can choose any religious faith you want, but most religions are human organized. They were created to split us apart and separate us. And you can love your religious faith. I love being Jewish, but I also grew up in a Catholic, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim family. So there was no prejudice in my family. But in reality, very few religions will unite people. Most religious beliefs divide us, which evil loves. Is there spirituality that exists without religion? Yes. But can religion exist without spirituality? No. The choice is yours, and your path is yours. And how you want to take that information and what you believe, it's all yours. Freedom of free will without constraint. So I'm asking you, Jeff, do you want to come back and master this reality, endure, persevere, and overcome it? Or do you want to see evil win and destroy this reality?
Well, of course, I want to master this reality. And what I wanted to ask you is, can you give us some tips to help us master this reality?
Yes. My favorite thing, if you want to stay clear of evil, stay positive in everything you do and even think. You must stay positive all the time. Stay away from watching the news. Stay away from war movies and other stuff like that. Wear gold if possible. It repels negative energy. You can't afford gold, wear silver. Dragon's blood, for instance. It is the resin of a tree that looks like a dragon skin. And when you cut it, it bleeds and looks red, hence the term dragon's blood. You've heard of dragon fruit. They're related, not exactly the same thing. It's the Catholic Church uses the resin of dragon's blood to remove all evil. People have heard sage, and they've heard of spikenard and frankincense. They're good, but dragon's blood is 10 times stronger. Next thing, something Edgar Casey taught people before he died in 1939, and that is get Larimar stone. Can you get the big stuff? It's super expensive, comes from only one location in the Dominican Republic. And the only people that go down into the mine anymore are people who live in Haiti because they're paid to go down a really dangerous tunnel. And you can just buy the chips. Be careful that what you get is real Larimar stone. Make sure it's the real thing, the real deal, and not something plastic or fake. Larimar sort of looks like a combination of lapis lazuli mixed with what's the other turquoise. It sort of looks like that, but you'll know the difference. And he said that stops any karmic connections and picking up any negative energies. The other thing is, I have a little book in front of me. I don't know if it can be shown. It may show, may not. I don't know. Right there. See the blue book there? All right. That book is called the Zohar. It is Orthodox Kabbalic Jews who took the Old Testament and put it into, well, there's actually volumes of this stuff, and they miniaturized this one. And this is called the Mini Zohar. And it is basically the book of Daniel and all the prayers of protection. And if you can get that and carry that with you, carry it in your car, carry it on you, carry it in your purse, carry it in your office, carry it in your home. It is also well known currently with what's going on in Israel and Palestine that all the Israeli soldiers are having them in their pockets. And there's been many stories where shrapnel or bullets hit the Zohar and not them. I mean, there's other things going on that every Jew in Israel now that's in this as a soldier is wearing tefillot. Those are the 4 prayer parts of the shawl that people wear, and that's what kept Israeli soldiers alive when one particular Israeli soldier was wounded and in a pile of other people that weren't Israelis. And what saved them is they saw these tefillot sitting or standing out from his shirt, and they realized this guy's Jewish. So that was another thing, but I don't think non-Jewish people would want to wear a tefillot. But Zohar, they would. So you got gold, you got silver, you got dragon's blood, and there's liquid versions of dragon's blood. The best stuff in dragon's blood comes from either Arizona or New Mexico. Costs about $12. It has to be kept cold. It's very thick. And the smell of that smells just like the angels, the good guys. The cheaper stuff you can buy at Walmart. You can just go to Walmart and, believe it or not, in the incense department with the candles for $1 a box, you can buy dragon's blood.
That's
It's
cool.
amazing.
What happens once you do master this reality?
Number one, you'll either stay in this world until your time to go home, or your time to go home, I should say, will happen, and you won't need to go through those life lessons ever again. See, we come in with a cross to bear. Jesus was one of the most famous because he actually had a cross to bear. And others will come in with other lessons that must be learned, that cannot be taken away from you. It can be lessened, but you, as in lowered, but you need to go through that. But in mastering this reality, you will no longer carry burdens from lifetime to lifetime ever again. That's part of mastering your reality. Anger, rage, resentment, fears, worries, doubts, sadness, hurt, and grief. You won't carry them anymore. You won't acknowledge them anymore. And you won't let evil get in between you and anybody else. So that's part of the mastering of this reality. And like the masters before us, you have a choice. Would you like to stay on this world and keep going? And if you do that, part of mastery is you pray for other people to wake up and you'll stay here. Some of the people who claim to be masters of this reality are talked about in Healing Masters of the Far East by Baird Spalding, 101 years old, was written and published after Baird's death. He claimed to be 108 years old and was trained by the masters in the Far East. And he said he met many people who claimed to be on this world more than 500 and 600 years old. Another thing that you master this reality, you won't need to move in a car, an airplane, or a boat. You'll be able to sit still or lay still and go out of your body and be in two places at the same time. That's another way of mastering your reality. So, can you do that yet, Jeff? I know I can't.
I can't. I need some work.
Now, when I teach people faint matter, that's the closest thing I can explain of mastering your reality. I teach people Einstein so they can be divinely connected, but with mastering faint matter or pushing energy as written in the book, you can push out negative energy from your body. You will also stop being afraid of pain. The other side said, no longer be afraid of pain. If something happens to you, simply call upon God and God will place his protective hand over you. Well, one of the things about learning to master your reality is being able to push this negative energy out of your body. And when you do that, it's a form of mastery. I fell down last year just as I was going on my book tour, and I broke my pinky right where it met my hand. And I fell and hit a step, and the bone came out of my hand. It was not comfortable. I was bleeding. I walked home dazed. I thought something had happened to my eye because I was really couldn't see out of the eye. And I was more concerned about my eye. I went and did Einstein. I wrapped it, went to urgent care. They said, yep, it's broken. They wrapped my hand. I said, can I go on my book tour? They said, can you hold off 2 weeks to get the swelling down? I did both Einstein multiple times during the day, and I did this pushing faint matter, and it pushed the pain out of my hand. I think I took one pain med. That was all I took, and I slept well. They put a cast on me, which I had to go through TSA. They had to double check it, make sure there's nothing there. And in 4 weeks, when I came back, they said, you don't need your cast, even though it was due to stay on for 12 weeks and be replaced multiple times for that 12 weeks. They said, nope, it's healed completely. They sent me for 3 PT therapeutic things, and they said, you're done. Now, a woman that went in with a similar accident on the same day as me, she was still wearing her cast 12 weeks later. Me, I can make a fist. Not that I want to punch anybody with the fist, but I can make a complete fist. So do you want to learn 2 ancient techniques to help yourself heal? 1, Einstein. 2, pushing faint matter. I can teach those things to other people so that you become your own healer, and God is your greatest physician, and there is no incurable, only people who cannot yet believe.
Many guests talk about that we are either going through or will go through soon some sort of ascension. Do you know about that, and do you have any comment on that?
They call it from different perspectives, ascension, lifting up, and some call it the harvest, which is not exactly a good term. You either will raise up and the world will divide into the good side and a different reality, or it won't, and it'll descend farther into chaos. The evil side wants us to ascend into chaos because they want to harvest our souls for their own purposes, whether it's using it and abusing it, or like vampires sucking it dry. The ascension process is called something, I know Christians call it a specific term, where people will be lifted off the planet. And unfortunately, I drew a blank into what it's called. And yes, that will be coming up. I can't give you the deadline, but I do know that it'll be happening soon. Also, they said to me from the other side to expect the day of 3 nights. Biblically, it's called when the sun will be offline for 3 days, but it's not also the sun and the light. It's talking about communications will be completely offline for 3 days. So the ascension process is coming. And do you want to be on the side of good and God, or do you want to still live on this particular reality, having to fight between evil and good? Do you want that dichotomy to be a little bit lifted up, or do you want to stay here? And like I said, 70% of the population of this earth couldn't wake up if God stood in front of them. So do you want to be in the 30% that could, or the 2% of that 30%, between 25 and 50 million people who will ascend or have ascension occur and be able to be lifted up and no longer need this dichotomy of good and evil? The choice is yours.
You mentioned you were going on a book tour. What is the title of your book?
The name of my book and my website are There Are No Lines in Heaven. And it's HTTPS :// there are no lines in heaven.com. And you'll see my old videos on there. You'll see my TV interview on Good Morning Dallas. You can also hear more about it. And if somebody wanted to book an appointment or an interview or something like that, they can do that. My telephone number will be there. My email will be there, and I'll be able to communicate. Now, that book was originally written for my old chiropractic college. And the dean that took over for the original dean that requested it said, "No way, Jose, we don't need or want this, and you can go away, and we won't call you, and don't call us." So I asked God, "What am I supposed to do with this book now?" And I heard back, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." And on what is Easter Sunday, I had my emails just light up. I had 88 emails in 2 hours from four interviews that occurred that all came out on the same day on Easter Sunday about helping people help themselves. So hopefully that answers that question. But There Are No Lines in Heaven will go into its third edition, and that will be coming out this autumn. Jeff, did we discuss it, how my book got its name?
I don't think so.
All right. I had a gentleman who hired me to come in as a consultant and a trainer, and he was working with the Gerson Institute in Mexico. And his name was Mr. Brown, and I write about him in the book. And he said, "I heard you met Jesus not once but twice." And he said, "I'm a devout Christian, and all my other doctors are Christian." But I said, "Well, why'd you want to hire me? I'm Jewish." And he said, "Because you did meet Jewish, and I'm devout, and I've never met Jesus, and I've never heard him answer any of my prayers." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Maybe because I'm in the line of David, and I'm actually related to Jesus." He would have been a cousin. And from my mom's side, Aaron would have been my great grandfather many times removed, and Moses would have been my great uncle, also many times removed. And I have had many rabbis in the family. Maybe that has something to do with it, and the fact that I've had a near-death experience. So he actually hired me for this consultation. And he tells me the story, that he was told by his church that only Christians go to heaven, and that if others go to heaven that are non-Christian, they're not in the front of the line. I said, "That's funny. Nobody ever told me when I crossed over twice." So Mr. Brown went on and had a near-death experience. Eventually, he would die and never come back. But when he came back from the near-death experience, he said, "Dr. Robinson, guess what?" And I said, "I don't know, Mr. Brown." He said, "Everybody up in heaven is welcome. There were Jews and Christians and Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and black and white and Hispanic and Asian. Everybody was welcome up there." And I said, "I told you." And he said, "You're right." So eventually, Mr. Brown would die. And on the day of his death, an angel appeared in my room and said, "There are no lines in heaven when you reach the pearly gates. Christians in the center, Jews to the left, Muslims to the right, for you are all children of God, and you are all welcome." And then the angel went on to laugh. How silly human beings are, that these bodies that we put on like clothes are simply here to experience life within that specific reality. And that was how the book got its name.
What do you think humanity's hierarchy is within the galactic community?
We are babies, and everybody's waiting for us to wake up and smell the divine roses and stop destroying ourselves time after time, every 25,000 years or every 250,000 years, whatever it is. They come to us as in other alien beings to witness the dichotomy between good and evil. Why? Because it does not exist in their planet or on their planet. So they come to us. They call us the zoo of the universe. Number one, there's more species on this world than any other world, especially theirs. And second, dichotomy of good and evil exists on our world, but not theirs. So they literally send beings of their own kind to our reality to observe us. So we're the infants, and even the angels are tired of our own race of beings, whether we're manipulated by evil or genetically modified by other races. They're tired of us blowing up our planet. They want us to get it finally and move into the hierarchy of other realms from other worlds so they can welcome us to join that intergalactic reality. And what will happen is some other world will take on that task and be the dichotomy of good and evil in the universe. And then we humans will go travel to the outer reaches of our reality, time and space wise, and we'll travel there. And we will see what the dichotomy of good and evil exists there rather than our own world. Hopefully that answers this question, which is a really important one. So thanks for asking that.
Dr. Scott, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Number one, stay calm. CALM. Why? If you stay calm, the divine can touch your heart and your head. Remember, do not come from your head, come from your heart for divine prayer to work instead. So if you can do anything at all, don't react or react by not reacting and stay calm under all circumstances. And if there's anything else you can do, learn how to do Einstein or pushing faint matter and enjoy nature so that you can connect to however you call the divine source.
Dr. Scott, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
And thank you to you and your wife for inviting me. God bless to you and everyone in the audience. Talk to you soon and see you on the internet.
Thank you, Scott. God bless you. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.